He looked me dead in the eye and smirked. Too bad, sweetheart. You signed the prenup. The courtroom was silent. His voice echoed like a slap. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. But I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I simply reached into my briefcase and pulled out the real prenup. Not the one he forged. Not the one he thought I'd forgotten. The one he actually signed 7 years ago with a notary's stamp and my initials on every page. His smirk vanished. His lawyer stuttered. And the judge. He stared at the document, then at Bradley, and said, "Looks like this changes everything." That day, I didn't just walk out with half of everything. I walked out with my dignity and a win he never saw coming. I met Bradley Turner at a real estate conference in downtown Denver. I wasn't supposed to be there. My firm had sent a last-minute replacement, and I almost skipped it altogether. But there he was, tall, confident, sleeves rolled up like he owned the world. He was hosting a panel on high-risk investment strategies. And I remember thinking, this man talks like a wolf in a suit. I should have trusted that instinct. But instead, I fell. We talked over coffee after his session, then again over drinks. By the time the weekend was over, we were texting like we'd known each other for years. He was charming, ambitious, full of dreams that matched my own. We bonded over our love of numbers and risk. He told me he wanted to build an empire. I told him I wanted to make mine untouchable. 3 months later, we moved in together. 6 months after that, he proposed. I wasn't naive, at least, not in the way people assume. I was a financial consultant. I'd seen love turn to lawsuits. I'd watched too many women lose everything in divorces because they trusted the wrong man. So I brought up the prenup. At first, Bradley laughed. He said, "A prenup? What? You don't trust me." But when he saw I was serious, he softened, said he respected it, that we were both professionals, and this was just smart business. We sat down with a lawyer, together, drew up terms we both agreed on. I would keep my business and my investments. He would keep his properties. Anything we built together would be split 50-50. It was fair. It was clean. We each signed a copy. I had mine notarized and scanned into a secure drive. I even printed 2 hard copies, kept one at my office downtown, the other in a fireproof box in our closet. I never thought I'd have to use it, because in those early years, we were happy. Or I thought we were. Bradley's company started growing fast. He flipped houses like a magician, always turning profit where others saw dust and debt. I helped him restructure his cash flow, negotiate with lenders, even redesigned his pitch deck when he was chasing big investors. He said I was the engine behind his success, but he was always the face. People shook his hand. They asked what his secret was. He never said my name. Still, I kept building beside him even when it meant putting my own career on pause. I started working from home, then stopped consulting altogether. We talked about kids. He said not yet. We talked about a vacation. He said maybe next year. We talked less and less. Until eventually, we didn't talk much at all. Then one night, I stayed up late going over some tax documents. And I noticed something odd. One of the LLCs we'd formed, the one that was supposed to be jointly owned, had been restructured under his name only. I asked him about it the next morning. He kissed my forehead and said, "Oh, that's just for simplicity, babe. The lawyers said it's easier that way." I wanted to believe him, but the numbers didn't lie. From that moment on, I started watching more carefully, quietly, closely. That's when I found the hotel receipt. He said it was a business meeting, said it was just one night. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just started packing the pieces of my heart into silence. Because I knew, and I also knew I had the prenup, the real one. I copied it to a new folder, printed another hard copy, took it to my lawyer. Just in case, I said. Bradley still smiled at me like everything was normal. He didn't know I was preparing for war. Not yet. When people say you just know when a marriage is over, they're not wrong. It wasn't one moment. It was a million tiny ones. Like how he stopped looking up when I walked into the room. How he never asked about my day. How I stopped asking about his. We became strangers, familiar ones living in the same house. But what finally cracked the illusion was the Christmas party. Bradley's company held it at a rooftop venue in Cherry Creek. The place was draped in white lights and fake snow. Everyone wore red, laughed loud, toasted to growth. And then I saw her, Samantha, the assistant. The one who always replied to my emails in lowercase letters, as if punctuation was beneath her. The one who called me Mrs. T like I was a fossil. She wasn't just there. She was on his arm, wearing a silk dress I'd once worn, laughing at jokes I'd once heard, touching him like I used to, in the soft spots, the secret ones. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked outside, into the freezing wind, and stared at the Denver skyline like it could answer all my questions. Bradley didn't come after me. When I got home that night, I made tea, packed an overnight bag, and went to stay with my sister in Boulder. She held me while I cried. Then she poured me wine while I swore. The next day, I called my lawyer. It was time. Bradley was cool as ever when he received the divorce notice. He even laughed. Finally, he said, "I was wondering when you'd grow a spine." That one sentence should have broken me. Instead, it sharpened me. I told him I wasn't looking for a fight. I just wanted what was fair. He said, "Fair Madeline, sweetheart. You signed the prenup." That's when it clicked. He was confident. Too confident. Like he had something I didn't. I asked my lawyer to pull the copy Bradley submitted with the court. When I saw it, my blood turned to ice. It wasn't the document I'd signed. Yes, it had my name. Yes, it looked official. But the clauses were different. Gone was the mutual asset split. Gone was my company's protection. This version said I waived all claims. It even had a line typed in "no spousal support under any circumstance." And it had my signature, only it wasn't mine. Not really. I'd signed thousands of documents over my career. My signature always tilted slightly right. This one was flat, forced, and the ink it didn't even match. I called my lawyer, told him what I suspected. We needed to find the original, not a scant, not a memory. The original. I went back to the house while Bradley was at work. I knew the code, still remembered where the fireproof box was stored. Deep in the closet, behind old ski gear and tax files. I opened it. Inside a stack of papers, yellowed at the edges. I found the prenup. It was still there. My signature, the notary's stamp, dated, stamped. I took it and left. My hands were shaking the whole drive to the lawyer's office. When he saw the document, he looked at me like I'd just handed him gold. "We'll file this with the court," he said. "Let's see how confident he is then." I wanted to smile, but something told me Bradley wouldn't go down without a show. And I was right. 2 weeks later, his lawyer filed a motion to dismiss my claims, said I was attempting to extort property I had no legal right to. They attached the forged prenup again. This wasn't just betrayal, it was war. I stayed quiet, didn't call him, didn't message, didn't retaliate online. I poured all my rage into paperwork. My lawyer hired a forensic document examiner. They compared signatures. The one Bradley filed, they concluded it was traced, poorly. The original authentic. Then came the financial audits. Turns out Bradley had shifted more than just LLC names. He'd funneled profits from joint ventures into shell accounts. Accounts only he controlled. When we confronted his lawyer with the findings, the man had the nerve to say, "It's not uncommon for successful men to protect their interests." I stared him down and replied, "It's not uncommon for smart women to protect receipts." Still, the court date was set. And Bradley, he walked in like he was heading to a gala. Tailored navy suit, cufflinks, smile for the cameras. Yes, cameras. He'd tipped off a few local blogs. High-profile divorce. One headline read, "Real estate mogul and prenup battle." He thought this was his stage. He didn't know. It was his sentencing. The judge asked for our documents. Bradley's lawyer presented the forged copy with flair. I waited. Then, calmly, I stood and handed the judge the real one. Stamped, signed, sealed. There was a moment of perfect silence. Then the judge adjusted his glasses and said, "We'll need to verify this." I nodded. I was ready. So was the notary? We'd subpoenaed him. He testified under oath, verified his stamp, verified the signatures. Then the forensic expert took the stand, explained the tracing, the ink analysis, the discrepancies. Bradley's smile faded. "Fast," his lawyer whispered frantically. Bradley looked at me like he'd just realized. I wasn't the same woman he married. I wasn't soft. I was steel. By the end of the hearing, the judge made it clear. The document filed by Mr. Turner is invalid. The agreement provided by Mrs. Pierce is upheld. My hands didn't shake this time, because I knew this was just the beginning of justice, of retribution, of reclaiming everything I was forced to give away. including my silence. You'd think that proving a forged prenup in court would be the climax. But for men like Bradley, humiliation is just the start. The court ruling didn't just validate my version of the prenup, it opened the gates to discovery, to audits, to everything he tried to hide. And what came pouring out was filth. He had offshore accounts, dummy corporations, properties in Texas and Nevada under false shell names. He'd been hiding millions. And thanks to the ruling, I had legal access to everything we built during our marriage. Every dollar he thought he buried was now under the microscope. He tried to delay the proceedings, filed motions, claimed illness, claimed I was harassing him, but the judge, he'd had enough. He scheduled the next hearing without delay. And this time, Bradley had to appear with full disclosure. My lawyer brought in a forensic accountant, a woman named Dana. She was quiet, unassuming, but I watched her dismantle Bradley's empire like it was made of tissue paper. She traced wire transfers, followed emails, linked every shell company back to him through digital signatures, phone numbers, even the names of his golf buddies. Every time she presented a new piece of evidence, Bradley's team looked more defeated. And I just sat there, calm, because rage, when refined, becomes focus. Bradley tried to settle. He offered a lowball figure, said he wanted peace. I declined, not because I was greedy, but because justice should never be discounted. Behind the scenes, my lawyer told me something else. There was another clause in the prenup, one most people never use. It stated that if either party engaged in fraud or concealment, they would forfeit their right to negotiation. Meaning if we proved intent, Bradley wouldn't just owe me half. He'd owe me more. Much more. So we built the case. I didn't post online. I didn't share quotes or throw digital stones. I moved in silence, gathered quietly, calculated every next step like I was playing chess underwater. Bradley, meanwhile, got sloppy. His team underestimated me. They thought I'd take the money and go. They didn't realize I was preparing to burn it all down. I found a document. An email trail between Bradley and a tech consultant he'd paid someone to digitally alter the prenup scan. The metadata didn't lie. Timestamps, IP addresses. He tried to erase them, but I had already pulled a copy from my archive. Digital breadcrumbs. We filed it with the court, and that's when everything shifted. The judge called a special session, made it clear this was no longer just a divorce. It was bordering on criminal fraud. Bradley's face turned the color of ash. And me, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat straighter in my chair, because that's what women like me have been taught: don't make noise. But now, silence was the weapon. Bradley's lawyer asked to meet privately. They offered me 70% of the joint estate, full ownership of the downtown Denver property, and a formal written apology sealed in court records. I said no. I wanted trial. Not because I needed more, but because I wanted the truth written in stone. A public record, not for revenge. For release, I walked into the final hearing with no makeup, no jewelry, just truth. The court was tense. Bradley looked thinner, tired, not the man with cufflinks and charm. He looked like a cornered animal. I almost pitied him. Almost. The judge recapped the entire case, then turned to me. Mrs. Pierce, do you have anything you'd like to say before we rule? I stood. My voice didn't shake. I gave up my career, my name, and years of my life for a man who thought silence meant weakness. I stayed quiet while he erased me from our finances, our future, and even our story. But I am not a footnote. I am not disposable. And today, I choose to be heard. The courtroom was still, then the gavel fell, and with it everything changed. The judge awarded me 85% of the joint marital assets, sole ownership of the Denver condo, plus back rent on properties where my name had been removed illegally, full reinstatement of my consulting firm's equity that had been rolled into his ventures, and damages for emotional and financial fraud. Bradley was also referred to the DA's office for further investigation. He didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, just nodded, and I walked out of that courtroom into the cold Colorado air and exhaled. 7 years of silence, 7 years of lies, all burned away in one sound, the truth being believed. I didn't celebrate, not yet, because winning in court is one thing, reclaiming your life is another, but for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was free. The first morning after the verdict, I woke up in silence. But not the heavy kind, the one that suffocates. This silence was different. It was clean, empty, sacred, the kind of quiet that follows a storm, when the last lightning bolt has burned out, and all that remains is the scent of rain and the sound of your own breath. I stood in the middle of my condo now, and looked out over downtown Denver. Cars moved like veins beneath the glass skyline. The city hadn't changed, but that day, I didn't answer the phone. I didn't return emails. I didn't reply to the "Are you okay" texts. I let the world wonder, because I needed a moment, just one, to remember who I was before I became his wife, before I shrank myself to fit into his spotlight, before I silenced my intuition to keep peace, before I accepted that being unappreciated was just part of being a wife. That version of me, she was gone. I brewed coffee and opened my laptop for the first time in months, not to scroll, not to distract, but to rebuild. The consulting firm I'd shelved years ago, I renamed it. Pierce Strategies. Clean, sharp, just like me. Within a week, I'd set up a new LLC, opened accounts, contacted former clients. Most were shocked to hear from me. Not because I'd reached out, but because they thought I was done. "Madeline, we thought you disappeared," one of them said. "No," I replied, smiling softly. "I was just silent. There's a difference." Business picked up quickly. Women especially reached out, not just for financial advice, but for stories, for support, for a mirror. They wanted to know how I did it, how I stayed calm, how I fought smart, how I survived betrayal with dignity. I never pretended it was easy, but I told them the truth. That silence, when chosen not forced, is power. I started giving talks, first small rooms, then conferences. I'd step on stage in a black blazer, heels steady, eyes clear, and I'd speak the words I once needed to hear. You are not disposable. Your silence is not weakness. And you are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself they loved, especially when she was dying to please them. One day, after a talk in Boulder, a woman approached me. She looked nervous, held her phone like a shield. "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't know me, but I think I know him." I froze, then nodded. "Go on." She pulled up a picture. Bradley, at a bar, laughing, with another woman. But it wasn't the photo that shook me. It was the timestamp. It was the night before our final hearing. While I was preparing documents, testifying, unraveling fraud, he was out, smiling, untouched. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I thanked her and took a deep breath, then went home. And deleted the photo. Because that man no longer had the power to wreck me, his existence, his behavior, his next act, it wasn't mine to fix anymore. My story had moved on. He was a chapter, not the book. A month later, I received a letter from his attorney. Bradley had been indicted. Fraud, falsifying documents, perjury. He might face time. I didn't feel joy, but I felt peace. Actions have consequences, and sometimes they arrive late, but they do arrive. I didn't attend the hearing. Didn't need to. Instead, I took a walk along Sloan's Lake. The air was crisp, the water still. I watched the sun dip low, orange bleeding into violet, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Later that week, I received a check. The court-ordered compensation, damages. I stared at the number for a long time. Not because of its size, but because of what it represented. Not money, but acknowledgement that I was wronged, that I was believed, that I fought and won without becoming like him. I donated part of it to a women's legal fund. The rest, I invested in myself. Pierce Strategies grew. I hired a team. All women, all sharp, all underestimated at some point in their lives. Together, we built something untouchable, not just a business, a legacy. A reminder that revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like freedom, like waking up in a place that's truly yours, like signing your own checks, like sleeping alone in a bed that holds peace, not secrets, like hearing your own name and not flinching. I kept one thing from the past. The original prenup. I framed it, hung it in my office, not as a trophy, but as a lesson, a vow to never forget the cost of silence, and the power of reclaiming your voice. A year after the verdict, I walked into the same courthouse, not for a trial, but for a speaking event. They'd invited me to speak to a group of law students about financial justice, fraud prevention, and the power of documentation. I stood behind the podium, beneath the same seal that once hovered over my entire future, and I told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity Because when the truth is finally seen, it no longer burns. It becomes fuel. I spoke for 40 minutes. They took notes, asked questions. But what struck me most was their silence. They listened. Listened like they understood something fundamental. That stories like mine weren't rare, just rarely believed. After the talk, a professor pulled me aside. He said, "You know, I've taught for 30 years, but this is the kind of case they remember." I nodded, because I would remember it too. Not just the war, but the woman I became through it. Later that evening, I visited a small bookstore on East Colfax. The owner knew me by name. She always did. I bought a blank leather journal, the kind that smells like ink and old courage. I took it home, sat on my porch, and opened to the first page. Wrote, "This time, I write the ending. Because here's the truth most people won't tell you. Revenge isn't the goal. Restoration is. You don't fight to ruin them. You fight to reclaim you." And every step I'd taken, the silent ones, the painful ones, had led me here. Whole, healed, honest. I began documenting everything I'd learned. How to recognize red flags, even when they wear a suit. How to secure your financial life before love enters the equation. How to protect your peace without surrendering your power. It started as therapy, then became a guide, one I plan to publish, not for profit, but for the next woman who's told, "You signed the prenup," so she knows she's not crazy, she's not alone, and she's not powerless. One afternoon, as I was proofreading a chapter, I received a message from Samantha. Yes, her. It started simply, "Hi, Madeline. I don't expect you to answer, but I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away. I reread it twice. Then I set my laptop down and made tea. When I came back, I wrote, "I don't hate you. I hope you find yourself too." Because forgiveness doesn't always mean a door reopened. Sometimes it's a door closed softly, with peace. Months passed. The book took shape. The firm thrived. But the most surprising part, so did I. I began dating again, not to fill a space, but to share it. On my terms. With boundaries. With self-worth that didn't depend on anyone else's reflection. One evening, I went to a gala. Black tie, velvet chairs, champagne towers. A man approached me at the bar. He said, "You're Madeline Pierce, right? The financial strategist. Not the ex-wife. Not the one from that court case. Just me." Yes, I smiled. "That's me." He introduced himself. We talked, we laughed. But when he asked for my number, I paused. Not out of fear, but out of choice. Because I'd learned something sacred. Your heart is not a lease. It is a deed. And mine, it was finally in my name again. Weeks later, I received the final notice from the court. Bradley had taken a plea deal. Fines, supervision, community service. He wouldn't serve time, but he'd never practice real estate again. And me, I closed the file, filed it away, and let it be history. Because legacy isn't what you keep, it's what you build. And mine was just beginning. Today, if you walk into my office, you'll see a wall of quotes. Not from famous men, but from women who survived, who rebuilt, who reclaimed. And right in the center, etched in gold foil, is mine. They told me I signed away everything, so I showed them what I still owned. My voice, my truth, and my damn name. That's the story, not of heartbreak, but of harvest. Of how I lost everything, and still came out whole.